Right to tell what they do not want to hear. CNN, MSNBC, Fox News. Tired of the same repetitive government narratives? Then wave goodbye to the distractions and rhetoric of corporate media. For this is Anti-Media Radio.
But I want to get the language right. The big government is in trouble.
You're all a bunch of slaves! Bunch of slaves!
What we need in the United States is not violence and lawlessness, but is love and wisdom and compassion toward one another.
What's your definition of media?
And now, here's your host, S.M. Gibson.
My name is S.M. Gibson, and you are listening to Anti-Media Radio. It is March the 30th, 2017. There is a lot going on in the news today. A lot more distraction, a lot more repetitive garbage. Of course, the whole world is still talking about Trump's Twitter account. It's a good distraction, I'll give them that. You've got corporate media going on nonstop still about Russia. And now we have the Flynn news. Does he have information? Does he not? Is he trying to get immunity? Is he not? We're going to talk about that tonight and a lot more here on Anti-Media Radio. We've got Shannon is taking the night off, but joined with us tonight is Miss Josie Wells. Josie, what's going on?
Hey, Scott, how are you tonight?
I can't complain. Just trying to not have my head explode, keeping up with all the news going on and everything we've got up at the antimedia.org right now.
Oh, I know. It's ridiculous.
It is that. I think for me, first off, the biggest news of the day for me is something that I hadn't heard talked about at all in corporate media, because why would they, is that every week during March that the U.S. has been dropping on average 500 bombs per week in Mosul. Nobody's even talking about that.
Right. I think the highest week was 600. We reached 600. Yeah.
And nobody cares. Like, this is a huge, massive deal. Think about when everything was going on with Aleppo and with Russia, and they just said they're massacring all these people. There's been hundreds of civilians killed by U.S. bombs in Mosul that we know of just this month. And
right.
It's just met with a shrug. We still got to talk about Russia.
Yeah, even when it is reported on, the Pentagon will always come back and deny or try to downplay the amount of civilian deaths when, we have organizations over there that are just kind of just a little bit dumbfounded because they have dead bodies surrounding them and they're counting them and they're taking care of them. They're doing what they can to get to as many people as possible. And then you have information coming out of the United States saying that that's not true, and it's just compounding this hatred for the United States all over the world, because it's not only is our military just annihilating them, but that it's lying about it. That's crazy.
Yeah, and I think that's probably got to be extremely insult to injury, is that they either deny it altogether, or when they do admit it, they come out like they did with the over 200 people that died in the one strike this month. And the Pentagon comes out and they just kind of shrug their shoulder and is like, well, yeah, it looks like that probably did happen, but we weren't trying to, so no harm, no foul.
Right. It's a lot of collateral murder, and it's not. It's just completely unacceptable. But there's so much going on that it's so hard to keep up with it. And plus, when you have the mainstream media, they're just constantly battling each other now as well. So with this whole Flynn thing, just this evening, Twitter, all over Twitter, is going back and forth. First the Wall Street Journal reported that he was seeking immunity for his testimony, and then Fox comes out and says that never happened. And then his lawyers released this statement that is, very carefully worded, but it indicates that he definitely did. I think the way it was worded was assurances. He'd have to be stupid not to seek assurances against unjust prosecution. But there's so much going back and forth, and there's so much battling. It's there are with departments within the government battling. We have all the mainstream media battling. So everything is so convoluted that no one knows exactly what's happening anywhere ever.
No, and it's a point that I talk about on this show constantly. And I know it's beating Seabiscuit with a baseball bat. I'm beating a dead horse, but
yeah,
there is no such thing as actual news anymore, because it's all confirmation bias. Whatever
right.
it is you want to believe, you can find it, because there's that much information out there. And if you're just staunchly anti-Trump, and so like this is definitely he's colluded with Russia, this has happened, you can find information out there to get yourself to believe that. You can find information out there to get yourself to believe anything.
Absolutely, because it's a market now. Information, like the news sector, is just a market now. That's because information is obviously is a product, and people want to they're backing their candidate. They have their positions, especially with how polarized the country has become. People have dug their heels in, so there is a market for each side. Like if it wasn't lucrative to have this biased information out there, it wouldn't be there. It wouldn't exist, because no one would be clicking on it. So these news outlets wouldn't be putting it out there. But because people want it, they're giving it. I think
it's partially that. I think with a lot of it, especially on the internet, it is monetarily based. But I think a lot of the stuff that you're seeing on MSNBC, CNN, I think that's more agenda propaganda driven, and just trying to muddy the waters that nobody really knows what's going on. Because you can watch CNN, then you can turn to Fox, and you can turn on CBS, and you can turn to NBC, and you're going to hear 4 totally different stories. And chances are none of those 4 stories are even true.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's I would say the television aspect of it is a lot more propaganda driven. But the thing is that, like I said, there's an audience for that. There is an audience for the pro. I still call it the pro Hillary side, because they haven't really let go of that yet. So they're still pro Hillary. So there's pro Hillary and there's pro Trump. But there's a side for both of them. And I think being propaganda driven is just, that'll never go anywhere. That's not going anywhere at all. But I think in more relation to social networks, and the content produced in that sense is a lot more ad based and consumer driven, because all anyone wants right now is information, and because it's gotten so muddied with the fake news and alternative news, and especially with not even addressing the fact that they can actually replicate human voices almost identically now, so nothing can ever even be believed. Recordings, anything like that can all just be completely simulated at this point. So we're kind of just existing in a world where nothing is real, or everything's real. It's
right, which makes nothing real.
Right, exactly.
And and I know Shannon gets frustrated when I talk about this, but I'm just like, and Nick does too, but I'm like, what's the point? It's over. People need to care about their loved ones, be happy, live their lives, stop buying into the BS, stop buying into the propaganda, try to look at things as objectively as possible without emotion, because as soon as you do, you're going to get steered down some crazy path. Look, okay, for instance, we're seeing all this Russia pile on right now. It's Russia. It's everybody that's saying this, whether it's the Wall Street Journal or the Washington Post, the New York Times, or CNN. What have any of those publications or organizations been right about in the past 16 months? Anything. What big story have they had that they were right about? They were sure wrong about the election, every single one of them. And there's people still buying this and believing it. Like, well, they wouldn't lie. What? They wouldn't lie. The Washington Post ran a story after Hillary collapsed at the 9/11 memorial that they had right before the election, insinuating that she was poisoned by Russia. You have people, you've got somebody, Louise Mensch, who's the craziest person on the planet, writing stories for the New York Times, insinuating that Andrew Breitbart was assassinated by Putin so Steve Bannon could take over Breitbart. We're talking years ago this happened, and this was all some big plan. Like, give me a break.
Yeah, it is ridiculous. And especially recently, the Washington Post just blatantly ran stories without checking the sources, without even contacting the sources, but saying that they did. There have been multiple, I think they're on more than one occasion, they were caught saying that they tried to contact their sources, and their sources would get right on Twitter and they're like, never, ever did they try to contact us, and then they would add it in later. And that just kind of gets glossed over. Not to mention the prop or not, that whole prop or not. Do you remember that was with the Russia, the list of, we're all Russian outlet, basically. We're either useful tools. It was like a 213 sites.
And the anti-media made the top 10 of those sites, believe it or not.
Right. Well, a lot of sites did, like a lot of them, and a lot of legitimate outlets, a lot of like established legitimate news outlets made that site. But prop or not, to this day, still has not identified who any of their experts are. Nothing. They're just an anonymous, group that magically popped up a month before that article went out and had zero contacts. They've never done anything like this before. They have zero credibility in in the information that they're putting out. They have zero credibility when it comes to, being able to claim that they have knowledge of this. But that just blew right over. No one even really cared about that either. It was insane.
Well, they had Ron Paul on that list. They had us on that list. They had Zero Hedge on that list. And that, to me, was the biggest, because, you can hear stuff about all these other people on TV or on different news sources, and you question, okay, were they a Russian or not, or blah, blah, blah. Look, I know who we are, and I know who I am, and I can tell you for 1,000% fact that is absolute make-believe. This is the farthest thing from the truth in the world. So it was obvious to me that this was going to be their argument to deter anybody from saying anything against what the government is doing right now. And they're just going to say, well, it's Russia, it's Russia, it's Russia. And to me, it's the weakest argument in the world. And believe it or not, I had people who I've known for years. I wouldn't exactly call these people friends, but I've known them for years, who told me, I was like, so that's made up. Well, it's not made up. They wouldn't have printed it if it was made up. I was like, you see, we're on that list. I'm not. Well, I know you're not Russian, but they wouldn't have said it if it wasn't true. So it's like, wait, what? You're acknowledging that that we shouldn't be on that list, but at the same time, you're saying they wouldn't have printed it if it wasn't true. Like, that's the world we live in. People are that brainwashed by all of this. Yeah,
it is definitely concerning. So and especially when there are, like you mentioned, and that was one of the stories I hit on in the live stream today was, how many civilians are being killed overseas. And this isn't even like a U.S. initiated strike. This is in support of the Iraqis air fight. and it's dumbfounding. It boggles my mind. How no one can even pay attention to that, and how people don't see that as a giant reason that maybe like how these terrorists are being just harvested. They're just being. It's when you start killing everyone all over the world, it's a kind of a problem for those people that live there, and they kind of grow up thinking, hey, maybe the U.S. isn't this wonderful savior.
And it probably doesn't help either that the United States has helped to arm, train, and fund these different groups. And for people to think, oh, that's crazy conspiracy, we have a Democratic congresswoman and a Republican senator that have both presented bills to Congress to get the United States to stop doing this.
Right.
This has been happening for a long time, on top of what you're talking about with, blowback and people just getting sick and tired of this. One thing that did come out today, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson and Nikki Haley both said that they're going to take a step back from Assad in Syria and let the Syrian people, of course, this is what they're saying. We've all been down this road before. If they say something, it may not necessarily be true. But they're saying that they're going to let the people of Syria sort out Assad, and we're not pushing for regime change at the moment. If that's the case, that's a small step in the right direction. That doesn't mean that Assad's some good, great man, but it certainly means that it's not our place to go overthrow more countries, to have more regime change, because we did it in Libya, we did it in Iraq. How's that working out for everybody? It's not. It's been what caused and harvested all this chaos.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And then it goes back so far, and it's just continuing now. Like, this is just the status quo. And I think, a lot of us were afraid that, if Hillary were voted into office, that it would just be more of the status quo. And I think that's what's happening now. I think if Hillary were in office, I don't think there would be much difference. There may be a little less chaos, like a lot less chaos, like topically, as far as between departments and that kind of stuff. But I think the same exact global decisions and foreign policy decisions are being made that would have been made under Hillary.
I don't think Hillary would have backed off of getting Assad out. But I do think it would be different as far as the chaos that they're putting on people and all these different stories from 1,000 different places, because I think with Trump in there, they're just trying to keep everybody so confused that nobody knows up from down. And I think they're doing a good job of that, to be honest with you. I don't think anybody really knows what's going on, other than, of course, you get people that everybody thinks they know what's going on. But I had everybody tell me that Hillary was going to become president, and she clearly was not going to become president, and she didn't. And that's the difference with somebody that sits in front of the news and does this, 20 hours a day versus somebody that listens to Keith Olbermann twice a week and thinks they know everything.
Right. I mean, even keeping up on it, we don't know. It's just it changes so quickly. There'll be reports that someone said something, someone leaked something out of the White House, and then it's not true, and then it is true, and then it's completely twisted and different. So it's for anyone to say that they know exactly what's going on and how, and it's
certainly.
It boggles my mind. And even I have my Facebook set, so unfortunately I can't do it on my mobile, but on my laptop it's set. My news feed, all it is one inspirational quote a day. Like, I can't see what anyone else is saying, and I love it that way. It's just one inspirational quote a day.
Everybody should do that. Or just get off of Facebook.
I know. Because otherwise, if I see it, I'm amazed at how many people are experts at what is going on behind the scenes at the White House. I'm like, I bet they could really use your help, because they don't seem to have a grasp on it. But everyone else on Facebook knows.
The first thing people have to realize is that A, they know nothing, and B, it's complete theater. And if you realize that it's theater, then you can start going, okay, wow, this is crazy. And, it's a game. This is all chess, and it's a show. It is a complete show. And I still think that's why Trump won. I think that's why it was inevitable he was going to win, because he knows that show very well. The problem is when he took his hand off the Bible, I think all that knowledge of PR that he has, it went out the window. I don't think you run a country that way. I think you can get elected that way, but I don't think you can be president that way.
Right, like it's a campaign strategy. Like it's a
Right.
great campaign strategy. But as far as, running in the office, and like we mentioned last week, and I'm sure a lot of people have, he's extremely thin-skinned. Like he really can't handle criticism. It tears him apart. It rips him to shreds. And that is a horrible, horrible trait for someone to, whose job it is to make very difficult decisions, and to face the public every single day, supposedly diplomatically. Obviously his strength is that he's not he just lacks all tact. But we're only two full months into it, 100 days or something it is into his presidency. And, he's at an all-time low, the lowest of any president in the history of all of the polls. This early into his presidency. And a lot of it is from his own base. He's losing, Republicans. He lost 10%. He went down in 2 weeks from Republicans, which is, his major base. So I don't know what's going to happen here as it goes forward. It's interesting to watch it play out. But it's just a lot, and just watching how it trickles down, the chaos, how it trickles down, into the public, and people fighting and losing friends, and just going to war, on social media. I'm just like, there's a giant, like, there's a lot at stake here, but it's not just limited to it's the right side and the left side. It's so much bigger than that.
Well, I can't believe people at this point haven't realized that there's no difference between the right and the left, and it is being used as division. Because I remember it was Trump's first or second week in office, and they were saying, well, his poll numbers are the lowest of any president, this early after being sworn into office. And it's like, does not everybody realize that Hillary Clinton would have these exact same poll numbers? She lost to a person with the lowest poll numbers ever.
Yeah.
It was the two worst candidates ever presented to the American people, and we've had some horrible, horrible, horrible candidates.
Of course. Well, and I think that was really strategic in the downfall of the way people interacted with each other online, because both candidates were so vile and so horrible that the debates, people feel so strongly about these issues, and because these candidates are so horrible on these issues, that they take it very personally. And at this point, it's now too late, because it's, things have been said and done, and decisions have been made as far as, especially when it comes to, liberals, and like the left liberals and the conservatives, and even getting into the alt-right. Now they're, they see each other, and they have a right to, because they're calling each other out on it. It's an all-out war between the people, because there are, you have the alt-right, or the we'll call them white nationalists. I don't know what they prefer to be called. I know they would like, for America, I guess they believe in white genocide, and they would like America to only be white people, right? European descent, I think.
Yeah, see, I don't think there is enough of those people for them legitimately to be taken seriously. Do those people exist? Of course they do. Are those people crazy? Yeah. Of course they are. But I think it's because there's a select few that are so loud, and of course they're used to demonize policies and politicians that other people don't like. For instance, David Duke. Who gives a crap what that crazy man has to say? But they wheel him out every election time and go, look who he endorsed. Who cares who he endorsed? Who's listening to that maniac?
Right, but what I'm saying is that people are feeding into this, and there are there are a lot of people across the country, a significant amount of people across the country that they're absolutely battling over this. Like I see it every day. It's enough that I don't. When it comes to, I know what you're saying, and I think you're right. I agree with you in the grand scheme of things. Yes, I agree. But all of these little fires are definitely contributing to a horrible climate, in the United States. So everyone is picking their own little battles, right? When they should be focusing on something much, much bigger. That's my point, is that it trickles down. So everyone's picking their little battles and their little wars, and everyone's spreading themselves out very thin over this, whatever their cause is, when in reality, we have a government that is literally stealing half of everyone's money out of their paycheck every week and using it to murder people across the sea, like across the country.
But that's politics in general, though, because they always use these niche topics. And
absolutely,
these social issues that we want you to be concerned about, who's getting married or who's not getting married, or the thing still aggravates me. And I don't know if they're still doing it now after what happened with Rachel Maddow, but the protest for Trump's taxes. It's like, that's what you're going to protest? Really? You're not going to protest the fact that they're taxing all this and wasting it and killing people with it? You're not going to protest that. You're going to protest something that does not matter.
Well, and this has a lot to do with it, because a lot of people will obviously focus on something that hits home emotionally to them. So, whereas I think with a lot of us, especially when it comes to activists, I can't speak for everyone, but I'll only speak for myself. Growing up, I was, always taught that, I should, use my advantages in life and do what I can to protect other innocent people. I was always kind of taught to question everything, do, all that, and make sure that it didn't have to come to my doorstep in order for me to do something about it. So, but I think, not everyone has that mindset. So they'll wait until something comes up that affects only them. And sometimes it's a very, very, very important issue. But sometimes it's a hot button issue that, that can be put aside for right now because, we have other things that are kind of life and death. But I think that's why a lot of these hot button issues are so emotional and so volatile, and why people do get hung up on them, because it hits home emotionally to them. So it's hard for me to judge other people and tell them not to care about it. Then again, it's like, well, let's look at the bigger picture here. Like, let's get a bird's eye view and see what the worst, who the worst offender is. And it's always the government. It's always the federal government.
Every time. But I think with these emotional issues, people have convinced themselves, or they truly believe that they're issues that do affect them for whatever reason. I think whether it's, the left neo-feminist that gets, up in arms and wants to protest about pronouns versus the right thinking, well, the immigrants are stealing our jobs. Neither one of those two things are affecting your daily life. They're not on a mass scale at all. And,
I guess it is tough with the pronouns, because when it comes to because a lot of people, a lot of transgender are actually targeted for pretty serious violence, and that definitely gets swept under the rug. So that is a very important issue, I think, that needs to be focused on.
There's a difference between violence and
and you're doing the thing where you interrupt me. That's what I was going to say. You interrupted me right before I was going to say that. When these people who have a very obvious right to protest against that and to bring that to the attention of the world, when it starts to get, muddled with focusing on pronouns and then taking it a little too far, obviously I don't see an issue if someone wants to be called whatever they want to be called, whatever they feel, that they would like to be called. It doesn't bother me. So I don't understand why people get all up in arms about how they refuse to call someone by their preferred pronoun.
I could care less either way.
Right. That's none of my business. But when it comes to, I think that the most important issue is when a minority, when a targeted group of people is being, they're being hurt. That is what needs to be the focus, not some of the lesser offenses, because then that's what that people will minimize that, and not that it should be minimized, but people will minimize that and say that they're overreacting, when in reality there is a very serious underlying issue there. So I think, what's happening is that has been happening, ever since politics began, was that everything gets muddled, and it's politics, issues, everything gets all mixed up, especially in the media. So, one side pushes the other side, and that side will push the other side to be even angrier. But yeah, I mean, it always comes down to the federal government and what they're actually doing.
It is, and you talk about, when it's people getting hurt. I want to quickly mention two stories we've got right now on the front page of the antimedia.org under their news section. Just the headlines alone tell you everything you need to know. Is CENTCOM chief insists vital U.S. interests are at stake in the Yemen war. For anybody that's kept up with the Yemen war, it has been an absolute bloodbath. Saudi coalition led. It's being funded, and Saudi Arabia is being armed by the United States. Barack Obama, I think it was $115 billion of weapons that he sold to him. And then, with a month to go, he stopped selling them and acted like he was some good guy about it. And then the other is U.S. generals warn of more civilian casualties to come in the Mosul invasion. For generals to come out and say, y'all better be careful here because this could happen. Think about how they downplay it or just outright lie about this stuff, and especially with civilians being killed and injured and casualties. For them to come out and warn and say, well, this is about to happen, get ready. First off, nobody's paying attention, sadly, because they're arguing about all this other stuff. But for them to come out and say that, what's really going to happen? For them to acknowledge that it's going to get worse.
Right, and wasn't one of the reasons was because the weather actually allows it's because I remember when I was reporting on it last week, one of the generals, she was saying that the weather was about to be perfect to increase the airstrikes, so there would be
the weather
more casualties. Yeah, I honestly it was almost impossible for me to just read that. I couldn't even fathom that was one of the it's insane. Here, look what it said. Okay, so yeah, so officials are saying that the soaring death toll was to be expected as fighting advanced in the old city. Oh my goodness. Okay, and so much as insisting that killing civilians was a natural consequence of bombing the city, and that's just terrifying because could you imagine if we were, if the United States were being attacked and they had a military base, but if they were aiming for a military base and hit a city close to it and annihilated a couple hundred Americans and said, well, that was just a natural, it's just a natural consequence of the war. Like that wouldn't fly with anyone here. Like that's not acceptable. But for some reason it's acceptable when it's our bombs hitting other countries.
Out of sight, out of mind. And that's how it's sold. And what's so crazy is neither the Republicans or the Democrats, with the exception of a handful of people on both sides that there's not enough of to make a difference, at least in Congress, nobody's questioning it. They're asking for it to be ramped up, if anything.
Well, yeah, and I guess the argument so far is that the rules of engagement are the same as they were under the Obama administration. Well, and even though it's not working, like this is obviously not working, they're not addressing the fact that these strategies aren't working. But the only justification is that it's the same as it was under the last administration. So they're continuing just a failed experiment of murdering tons of people because the administration before did it. So instead of stopping it, they're just going to up the effort of a failed strategy. They're going to keep going harder. It boggles my mind.
That's what they do, though. And now you've got Tillerson came out today, something else. They're waiving the human rights conditions on Bahrain to sell them a bunch of arms and F-16s. And that's, another Gulf state that's been involved in what's going on in Yemen. We've talked about Yemen a lot on this show, but for people, go look at the pictures of what they're doing there. It's outrageous.
Yeah, I think people should, if anyone hasn't watched Dirty Wars yet, they should. Because I remember when that came out, and that's when I first really started to understand what was going on in Yemen. And it's a great documentary, and it's by Jeremy Schiller. What's his name? My mind, it's a blank. The guy at The Intercept.
Scahill.
Scahill, thank you. I almost said Jeremy Schilling, who I think is a baseball player, but Kurt Schilling is a baseball player. Oh my goodness, my mind.
Yeah, you were way off. That's okay.
I was way off. Anyway, but this movie, Dirty Wars, is a wonderful documentary. If you just want to kind of go back to the beginning and see how, and I'm sure it started way before then, but just when U.S. journalists started to get a much better grasp on exactly what was happening in Yemen and the kill lists and JSOC and how it a lot of it all started to come together. The work that he did there was really great, and it's a documentary that's definitely it's emotional and it'll get to you, but I think it's a must watch for anyone who wants to really figure out what's going on and how it's getting so bad.
I think we're so entrenched in the Middle East. I don't know how we reverse this unless which is clearly not going to happen, unless you got somebody in there like a Ron Paul that's just like, all right, we're bringing everybody home now. Then look, Trump ran as saying we're going to stop policing the world. We're going to pull this back. Obama ran saying we're going to stop policing the world. We're going to pull this back. George W. Bush ran in 2000 saying we're going to stop policing the world. We're going to pull this back. The last 5 presidents have bombed Iraq. The last 5. Going back to 1988. What are we doing?
Campaign promises are not even a thing. They're just, for anyone to ever believe them is just, I can't. It's because it's a constant repetition. I can't believe that it's still happening, that people are still, I mean, I can, and we all predicted that, President Trump would not follow through on almost any of his campaign promises, which he hasn't.
Hey, I will say this, he has followed through on some stuff, just the stuff that I disagree with wholeheartedly.
Right.
But I will give him that. I mean, he actually has followed through with some stuff. Like Keystone Pipeline, that's happening. Dakota Access Pipeline, that's already got all running through it right now as we speak. He's been in office 2 months. So, great job. You did the stuff you didn't need to do.
I know. And then the giant things that are affecting the entire world. But I mean, that is actually pretty significant too. But it's, I don't know.
The first thing to stop, and I think this is what everybody should agree on. The first thing that we need to stop is dropping bombs on people. And they somehow get in these emotional arguments. Whether you're talking about the right and they think that whether radical Islam or Muslims or whatever it is they blame it on, they're coming to take over the world. Why isn't there terrorist attacks in Japan? Why isn't there terrorist attacks in other free countries around the world that haven't been bombing them for years? And not only that, where are all these attacks in the United States? Of course, you can point to one here, one there. But where are all these attacks? Where are all these people being killed at? Because when you look at the people being killed overseas by U.S. bombs, whether they're being dropped by Saudi Arabia or the United States, thousands, hundreds of thousands of people have died.
Oh, yeah. The ratio is just astounding.
It is. And the thing that's so frustrating to me, especially when they talk about when they want to bring Muslims into it, it doesn't matter what side you're on. It drives me nuts. Because, for instance, they say, well, Trump's got a Muslim ban. And then you've got all these other people saying, have you heard all the crazy stuff Muslims do? They behead people. They do this. They do that. It's like, guess what? It's not a Muslim ban. It's a who would Saudi Arabia ban from their country ban. And all the stuff you're describing as all this crazy quote unquote Muslims, that's all the stuff Saudi Arabia does. Those are our supposed allies. Everything you described is Saudi Arabia. They're the ones beheading people. They're the ones that won't let women drive. They're the ones that are so completely oppressive to their population. Nobody
and
cares.
don't they have a seat on the UN as they're
the head of the Human Rights Council?
Yeah, they're the head of the Human Rights Council for the UN, which is everything's backward. We do repeat that a lot, but it's unbelievable. It is absolutely unbelievable.
I mean, it's from top to bottom. It's insane. And they use 9/11 to excuse everything they do. And if there was any country that there was to point out to go after that happened, it would have been Saudi Arabia. And that was their ally. It is literally 1984. It's all doublethink. It's infuriating. You can't get this through to people. They keep going with their, well, did you hear what they said on TV? Did you hear what they said on TV? Okay. All the people that are upset about Russia, what's the end game here? What do you expect to happen? If you're Dianne Feinstein, what do you expect to happen? What do you want? You want us to go to war with Russia? Will that make you happy? Now, if you asked that to John McCain, he probably would say yes. That is probably what he wants. But, he's a psychopath. But all these other people, what do they think is going to be the end result of all this blaming Russia on everything? That is not to excuse Russia. That is not to excuse Putin. Guess what? That's not our country. That has nothing to do with us. We have to deal with what's here at home. And what do people think is going to happen? They're pushing us into a world war. Do they not realize this is what they're doing? Do they think they can just bully everybody because we've bullied all these countries in the Middle East for so long? Like, what do they think is the end result?
I still think it's really weird that Russia hasn't really reacted too much, to any of this. I feel like their response, really Russia's response, and Putin especially, has been pretty mild for being accused of a lot of tampering and a lot of spying and a lot of, I don't know. Is it just me, or are they pretty quiet about it?
Well, he said today, somebody asked him, it was either today or yesterday, because of the time difference, but he said, he pulled the George H.W. Bush, the read my lips. No, we didn't have anything to do with their election, even though he quoted Reagan when he said it. He was talking about George Bush. He said it was Reagan that said the read my lips thing. But supposedly now they're eyeing what's going on in Libya. We'll see. They did definitely go into Syria. We'll see if they go into Libya. I mean, that's, another powder keg waiting to go off. I think we've been lucky to avoid world war up to this point just because of what's happened in Syria. Russia they have supposedly cut some of their defense budget, So it doesn't look like they're ramping up to go to world war with anybody. I think Putin is from the KGB era that he's from, which of course, you get people that don't know anything like, well, he's communist. No, I think that what that means is that he's from a world where there were two superpowers. And because of that, you had a yin and a yang, and neither one of them could get completely out of control. With the collapse of the Soviet Union, and especially what happened after 9/11, the United States was able to capitalize and became the sole superpower because the United States backed out of a lot of agreements that they had with Russia after 2001, in the name of security. And they said, well, we're going to start doing this, we're going to start doing that. And, what could Russia say? They just were like, okay. And they were so small, I don't think the United States ever thought that they would ever get back to a point that they were another contender on a global level. And now Putin has armed himself up to a degree that they are a player again. I don't think they're the player that they're portrayed as, but they definitely have some clout throughout the world. I think he's right. I think you do have to have that balance, because one is going to get out of control, because the United States has gotten out of control. And I think that it's insane to me that you have right now on Poland all the way down Europe, you have Russia surrounded by U.S. military and U.S. military interests. Russia, for whatever you can say about him, all the good, the bad, the horrible political stuff that Putin does inside his country, I know it. He does it. Nobody's arguing that. They have 2 bases throughout the world, 2. The United States has 90 times that. There's a big difference between Russia's place in the world and the United States. Russia is surrounded. I promise you, if the United States was surrounded by China, if there were bases all in Mexico, all in Canada, looking down on us, we would feel threatened by that. Unquestionably, we would feel threatened by that, no matter what was going on within our borders.
I'm not saying that I expect him to, declare war. I just mean more of like the Putin attitude, like the are you guys insane? Like it isn't us. But I guess in his mind, he also seems like more of a guy who's just not going to bother with, stuff that is silly and nonsensical.
And I think that is part of it completely. And I think also there's no doubt that he is a masterful geopolitical chess player. And I don't think he's going to show his hand no matter what he's doing.
No, and he's got his hands full right now with the Ukraine anyway. They've been at odds for a while, and stuff has been I know it's been getting a little crazy with them.
It has, and that whole region. It's from top to bottom, and of course now we're bringing in the East with everything, and we've got whatever craziness is going on with North Korea. That's exactly what everybody needs, is to start focusing on that crazy lunatic, because that guy is nuts. And if you start advertising the stuff that he says, they've been saying that stuff forever. We're going to get rid of the United States, blah, yeah. If you start advertising that to a population here in the U.S. that is so driven by fear, and they're going to hear this crazy stuff, of which he has no capability of doing any of it, they're going to start chaining for blood and chaining for bombs. People need to realize this isn't China. If China was saying this stuff, I would be concerned. China is going to keep North Korea in check, period. That's how it's always worked. That's how it's going to continue to work. You've got Trump meeting with the president of China, next couple of days? I don't know. Days get away from me sometimes. I know it's coming up here soon. I think that'll be very telling. I don't think that he will treat him the way he treated Merkel, that's for sure. Again, because I view all of it as theater, I thought that was pretty funny. I think all of it's pretty funny when he's just a complete jerk to people for absolutely no reason, because, it's theater. Whatever.
It is. He's a great entertainer, a horrible person, but a really good entertainer.
Yeah.
And it's terrifying. And we really didn't get to talk about tonight, but maybe we could talk about it a little now, but what is it? The NGA, Alice wrote that article about it's called the NGA, that the surveillance network that none of us had ever really heard of.
Yes, go into that a little bit for people who don't know about it.
Okay, so let me go back. I was just getting ready to pull this up, just because it's intricate. So I want to make sure I get the right. Where is it? I think it was yesterday. The days all blend together, but was it yesterday or today? There we go. It must have been 2 days ago. But it's called the NGA, and it's a massive spy agency, and it stands for National National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, and it's an obscure spy agency that it's a multi-billion-dollar surveillance network, and it's a lot like the CIA and the NSA, as in, it's an intelligence agency, but it also serves as a combat support institution, and it functions under the U.S. Department of Defense. So I guess Obama never really took to it. He had a hard time wrapping his mind around it, but it became, I guess, more relevant towards the end of his administration, when with drone warfare started to really pick up, because what they do is they have, where is it? Let's see. I have to go down here. Okay. Like I said, they function more with the military. And prior to Trump's inauguration, the NGA, they only targeted the Middle East, or whatever spy satellites orbiting the globe captured. They refrained from really spying on the United States. We think, who knows? But they've stayed out of scandals for the most part. No one's ever even talked about them before. But a lot of people are concerned that under Trump, he will be, using that a lot more, especially because he just gave the CIA more power to wage covert drone warfare, especially in secret, shielding important information on such operations simply by allowing the agency to carry out missions without first seeking authorization from the Pentagon, which is insane to me. So it seems that, an organization like the NGA, which does serve as support for the military, would be perfect to work with the CIA, especially since they're going around the Pentagon. So they're going to need intelligence from somewhere. So a lot of people are keeping their eye on this, but it just boggles my mind that none of us had ever heard of this, and this is something that's been used for years.
And that's something like people have to wake up to, and like Trump supporters especially, is one thing I tried to hammer home while he was running is whatever he was saying that people liked or they didn't like, whatever. One thing he never, ever, ever said is we're going to have less government. He was never somebody like when you had somebody like Ted Cruz, who never should have been president in a million years, but he would preach small government. Do I think he would have done it? No. But you get certain people, especially on the Republican side, that preach small government, and it never comes to fruition. Trump never even did that. He never told people that he was going to do that. The last thing we need is a more expansive government, especially a covert expansive government, which is what you're talking about here. More secrets, more stuff kept from the American people with technology that I don't believe anybody can wrap their head around that the government possesses. If anybody believes that their communications, whatever it may be, is not being recorded, they're crazy. The only good part of that is that they're getting so much information that it kind of becomes a flood, and you're looking for a needle in a haystack at that point, I think. But
I don't think so. I absolutely think they have the ability to sort through that. I don't think it's difficult at all. I think that actually is a misconception that a lot of people have, because think about it this way. Think about Google, right? Think about how much information they take in. They take just as much as the NSA would. They take just as much information in. They're able to sort that so quickly and so perfectly to target ads based on what you looked at minutes before. It is so easy to sort this information because they wouldn't, the reason that they take it in is for it to be used. And if they're not able to use it the way that they want to use it, they wouldn't be taking as much of it in. They wouldn't do that. So I guarantee you that it's a lot easier than we assume. It may not be, as quick as some of the other corporations, like the private corporations can do, but I believe it. I have a hard time believing it would be hard for them to pull anything up that they wanted to at the drop of a hat.
Oh, I totally believe if they wanted to, if they actively sought to pull it up, that they certainly could do it. But as far as finding anything, like just going after people for something they say on the phone, there's crazy people in the world, and there's, a million people at a time saying something crazy. You can't go after all of them at once, I don't think. Who knows? I guess they could probably, but I don't even want to think about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's more like they just have it, the information is taken in and filed away so that, if one day that I became hypothetically, I became a target of an investigation, all they'd have to do is pull up.
In 5 seconds. Yeah.
Yeah, and they'd have every single thing on me. And I think that's the most important part, because they, just look at the warrant that was signed that was approved by a judge for the Google search. A warrant was approved to get the personal information of any person who searched someone's name, a victim of a credit card fraud. They were trying to find out who did it. And so, I mean, stuff like that, anything. So when they pull up this information, what happens is they'll pull up all the personal information that, they need on all of these people, which is probably going to be a bunch of people. So they're going to have information that they obviously don't need, a lot of information. But it's kind of a given that they're going to stumble across some kind of crime along the way, like some kind of innocuous little crime, just because of how many laws there are. And that the fact, the unintentional, people commit 3 felonies a day without realizing it, kind of a thing. Right. So then then they have to go and figure out how to go about and go after these people without breaking any laws, which I mean they do anyway. It's a terrifying implication. It just gets further and further. They get further and further legally allowed to do this.
We've got only a couple of minutes here left on the show. Real quick, because it amuses me, I wanted to give a shout out to little Marco Rubio for dragging his name into this Russian crap. I think that's hilarious. He wasn't getting enough attention put on him. Where we go from here, what we're going to be seeing next week is probably going to be something completely different than we're seeing today, other than the big picture stuff, which seems like it's the exact same every time we come on the show. They're pushing for more wars. They're pushing for more intrusion into your personal lives. They're pushing for more control. They're spewing more propaganda. They're spewing more distractions. Stop believing what all these people are telling you on the TV. Stop believing these corporations. Do you want to be an independent thinker? If so, then you need to keep up with independent media. If you want to be a corporate thinker, then guess what? Turn on your TV and watch corporate news. But you're not going to get anything of substance from doing that. Many people, I guess, over the past year felt deceived, felt betrayed when they were told over and over and over in all these polls that Hillary Clinton was going to win. Well, guess what? None of it came true because they were in the position to distract you and deter you from what's really going on in the world. Now that we have Trump in office, he's doing stuff that he should not be doing. And yet they keep you focused on his Twitter accounts. They're not talking about the fact that they've dropped 500 bombs every week this month in Mosul. Nobody's mentioning that. We're talking about his Twitter. And Trump's great at distractions, and I think he realizes that he can use that to his benefit. I mean, today he started calling out congressmen and people of the Freedom Caucus by name. You want to get people talking about something, there you go. And I think even with this Flynn stuff, I think this is more of a distraction. I think it's all just this big runaround, and nobody's keeping up with the innocent people around the world that are suffering for what? For greed? I still don't know if I know what it's all really for.
I don't know. But maybe next week we can talk about some artificial intelligence, because there's a lot of stuff that people don't know that's actually happening. And that's some pretty important stuff too.
We'll do it. For Josie, I am SM Gibson, Anti-Media Radio. We'll be back next week. Out.
I'm I'ma let them know through the stereo. Yo, here we go through the stereo.
This is JJ